Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Leadership and Equity, where we feature a distinguished Lead Boston alum who spends this time with us to share some their perspective on their career trajectory, how they got to where they are today, what have they learned along the way, and share some advice, for other leaders and other individuals who are interested in impact and change in their communities, in their workplaces, and in their lives. This is a great opportunity for us to start getting familiar with each other. I'm thinking that we're going to need each other more than ever as we head into 2025. So I am very honored, to be here with you, Mr. Thaddeus. So let me say a little bit about Thaddeus. And I could cover a whole book, but I'm going to make it a little briefer. Thaddeus is a distinguished advocate for social change, and he is renowned for his impactful work in photography, literature, and community empowerment. As the senior director of diversity initiatives, oh, we have more people coming. This is so exciting. As the senior director of diversity initiatives at MassHousing, he has been instrumental in driving initiatives to promote equity, inclusivity, and prosperity throughout Massachusetts. Drawing up on his extensive experience in community safety and well-being, Thaddeus is dedicated to pioneering innovative approaches to engagement and development. In 2019, Thaddeus launched the Black Joy Initiative. It's a dynamic celebration of Black culture's thriving and beauty, and it is now in its fifth year. Black Joy Day in Boston has become a cornerstone event, uniting the community in joy, pride, and unity. Through this initiative, Thaddeus led the effort that produced the youth author book, To My Kin, along with creating a clothing line that embodies the spirit of Black joy. In addition to his work with the Black Joy Initiative, Thaddeus is a co-founder of the Road to Wellness 5K, which is now celebrating 10 years of addressing health disparities and promoting well-being within underserved communities. Thaddeus also co-founded the Al Ray Second Chance Scholarship and Hood Fit, empowering young youth voices and fostering community resilience. His commitment to social justice has garnered him numerous awards, including the Visionary Award from the Timothy Smith Foundation and Boston's Most Influential Men of Color in 2023. As a United States Air Force veteran, thank you for your service. His dedication to family and community remains unwavering, driving his ongoing efforts to create environments where joy can thrive. All right, and that doesn't cover it all. Let me just say
I think that was you said you were going to do a book. I think that was a book.
Not quite, Thaddeus. You're quite a personality. So I would like to welcome you, Thaddeus. And once you do your hellos, if you can tell us a little bit of what led you to your current role and field of work.
Well, first, I want to say thank you for having me. It's a joy anytime I do anything with YW, but more so, I see two of my classmates on, right, on this on this Zoom, and I absolutely love that, and I love them and the joy that they gave me that whole year of just being able to have real conversations. Um, and really, thanks to them is part of why we push Black Joy, right? Because the reality is that was my YW project, but I'll get to a little bit more to that. Uh, but I do want to say that I know you said I'm the senior director at MassHousing of diversity initiatives, But I want to be clear, I'm here speaking for Thaddeus today. I'm not here speaking for MassHousing. Even though we have an amazing leader, it's an amazing organization. Crystal Cornahay is also a YW alumni, and she's our executive director. And so you can understand why I believe in this work, because I also have somebody that leads our organization that I can believe in and that understands this work and moves this work forward. So when you start to think about what led me to this role, so after the military, I started working in housing, but more as a director of public safety and looking at the security aspects. And what I learned was that I had to understand more than just the enforcement side. I needed to understand prevention, intervention, and reentry, and to be able to listen and work with residents across the state to understand what their hopes and dreams were and what they wanted for legacies. I think my first meeting that I went to with a resident group, I always say that I went in and I thought I was Superman because at that time I was, 6'4", 250, all the muscles looking like The Rock. And I came in thinking that I was going to change and save the world. But the one lady told me that I just needed to sit down, be quiet. And she didn't say it that nicely, but sit down and be quiet and listen, because they had hopes and dreams, and I needed to figure out how I could help them achieve those hopes and dreams that they had for themselves and that they had for their children and the children that were yet to be born and for that particular community. So that was an amazing lesson learned. From being the director of public safety, I became the manager or division director of the community services at MassHousing. And we focus on training, empowering communities, supporting families. And you've already mentioned a lot of the nonprofits that I've worked with. The Road to Wellness, I am so excited that, we just celebrated 10 years because, most nonprofits don't last 10 years. We have over 40 partners. We went from when I started Hood Fit to moved into the Road to Wellness from 100 people to now we have 1,500 to 2,000 people. When you start to look at the volunteers and the others, the other initiatives around that that have happened. I'm also, as a photographer, I've been all around the world, and being able to have a unique perspective on diversity and inclusion, because as you know, I'm an in-your-face photographer. So I like to, I do a lot more street photography. I'm not doing weddings or any of those other things. And I see the note about my picture from Cuba. Absolutely. And so, so it's being people asking me about, even in Cuba, I was in a lot of people's homes. People asking me, how did I get into their homes? Because I talked to them, I got to know them. And this is from a person that has very little Spanish language and knowledge, but being able to meet people where they're at, talk to them and have real conversations and understand how much we're alike. And I understood that there was a lot through that. I understood that there was a lot that I needed to learn. And at the same time, there was a lot I needed to unlearn. And how do I actually share those expanded views? And then I think the last thing is, when I started to think about everything I've done at MassHousing, what I've done in the community, I'm on the back nine of this work, right? And so how do I really start to make impact, and where can I leave uh, some of the most impactful work at MassHousing that's not in community. And so taking this position as the director of diversity initiatives inside allows me to have some impact on the culture at MassHousing, but also allows me to really understand community and really what that means. And so as I move on to my next thing, and whenever that is in the future, out in the community, there's a different way to address it. And what I'm learning is really dealing with and understanding people has been a blessing, that we can have some of these tough conversations that we don't normally have.
Thank you so much, Thaddeus, for that. I am really excited that you said, I'm thinking about what's next. It's like, you continue, always thinking of different points, different, ways that you can bring, what you bring to our community, and how you can continue that work, working with young people, working with families and communities, and then the important, also the very important work that you do to promote health and wellness, within our community, which is something that is so necessary and vital, for us to continue doing the work that we do. So thank you for that. Now, Thaddeus, let me ask you, how did the Lead Boston program influence your leadership journey and shaped your approach to advancing racial and gender equity?
So I think let me not say I think. The reality is we had some amazing conversations over that year. Uh, and people pushed and challenged each other in many different ways. And it made me think about, because I walked in the room, honestly, I've done a lot. What am I really going to learn? I'm sure a lot of us did, right? And what impact is this going to have on my life? And I found that it's been life changing because not only did I learn that it was certain avenues of history that was misrepresented to me, and I was able to get some clarity that there are certain aspects of programming within the many areas that we touch that I just didn't truly understand, that I thought I had an understanding of. And being able to get the many different points of view from the 40 different people that were there, and them being vulnerable enough to open up about their own beliefs, their own challenges, and their own thoughts made it quite impactful of me thinking about what can I do next, right? And so there's always this thing about we got to do a whole lot, but one of my friends always says, if you can't do a whole lot, do a whole little. And so it really helped me start to think about those other areas that we're talking about that are not housing, that are not public safety, that are not Black joy. But, and so when I started to think about the LGBTQIA community and how I get involved in that through not just through our agency work, but also through my photography and through my community work. There was a different approach of understanding of how to engage with that and how do I do a whole little versus trying to think of how do I do a whole lot, right? And so I think, looking through those particular issues, the importance of fostering dialogue and promoting awareness of areas, and within my personal significance to me, uh, was really what I learned. And I still have a lot of those friends today, right? That show up at different events, that call me out when they think I need to be called out. And I don't take any of that personally, right? I appreciate it and I love it, right? And I think that building that cohort, building that all of those understanding all of those other hopes and dreams and seeing their impact. And really it was this cohort and some members of the cohort that helped me make it through COVID, right? Because one of the people was leading some initiatives at the hospital, and being able to speak with them on a weekly basis and be able to help them think about how do they actually connect with the community of color and how does the hospital really start to think about COVID? How do we start to think about the vaccine? How do we think about the other cultures and what that looks like? And so having those connections, and I think we undervalue our social capital and YW Boston gave me a lot of connections and the social capital that allowed us to be able to bridge, link, whether it's intellectual capital, whether it's cultural capital. A lot of those things really happened through that one year, and it continues to happen today.
Yes. Oh, everything you said, Thaddeus, reminds me, you brought me back to when I did Lead Boston, that you walk in there, especially as a woman of color, in my case, thinking that, what am I going to learn here? I already lived this. This has been my life. And I found that when you're in the program, you unpack, the systems, you really get all, unpack all the layers and get to the root, of these systems to understand, how they how they present barriers and how they keep certain groups marginalized, and oppressed, and understanding that if you don't really get what the root of an issue is, it's hard for you to come up with solutions and initiatives to address that.
Right.
Yeah, so, and you also mentioned something that I hear, and it makes me really happy from other Lead Boston alums. Yesterday, I was at the breakfast with the current class that is graduating, and to see the diversity in the cohort and see how people feel after going through the program. In your case, the relationships that you formed, during your Lead Boston experience continued. It wasn't like we finished the program, goodbye, everybody, go back to their jobs. It's like, no, where you were there and a community was built,
Right.
Which is so much needed. I always talk about community and purpose, because there's nothing that we can do on our own. We need each other,
Yeah.
we need each other to live, period. We're social beings.
Yeah, and it was a beloved community. It wasn't just a
Oh,
community. It was a community that valued each other. It was a
yes,
community that some difficult things happened to folks there, and they were able to share those things and allow us to love on them to be able to help
yes,
them move through that. And I think sometimes the biggest thing that we have a problem with is being able to, one, ask for help,
yes,
and two is allow people that we don't necessarily know to love on us. And I think the last thing is really to trust others and to release our vulnerability when we really need help. And I think that group allowed us all to be able to be in that space. And when we came there, we were really like family, right?
yes.
You know, at that Thanksgiving dinner, not everybody at the table getting along that day, right? But
Yeah.
it was a beautiful space.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for, sharing that, because I feel the same way. And others have shared the same, how many times do we get to be vulnerable? If you are leading an organization, if you are leading, an initiative, people are looking up to you like, oh, that person has it all together, they're strong, they can deal with anything, they can deal with any obstacles. And sometimes we forget that you're human, that we're all
Right,
human,
right.
and Lead Boston creates, like, what's interesting, that when you become vulnerable, it's scary. It's
Mhm.
scary, but the way that, that it's done when you're going through the program is that first, you build that trust with your cohort. You don't, you people begin the program and everybody's quiet, the first program day, the second program day. And then the more that you dive into the issues, that we're dealing with, and the more that you hear from other individuals about their own journeys,
Mhm.
and it's an opportunity, I feel, to learn and hear and build community with individuals that otherwise you would not have that opportunity.
Yeah, I just want to correct you on one thing.
Yes, please.
The 2019 group didn't have a quiet day.
You did have a
We jumped in from the first minute. Right? So we didn't have the day one with quiet, day two with quiet.
really?
No, everybody was in it, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I'm trying to remember, because this was right when the pandemic, right? It was your class
exactly, Key.
2000. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So
it was beautiful.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
beautiful and timely,
yeah,
because we had to pivot,
yeah,
to a whole different way of living that we
yeah.
didn't know how to do. We were just learning. But you're right, you're right. I find that people feel that that's a space where they can share their voice, share
Mm.
what's in their heart, and that others are there willing to hold those emotions, and support.
Yeah.
which I think it's a beautiful thing. Yes. Thank you so much, Thaddeus. Now, Thaddeus, if you were talking to an aspiring leader, somebody of so many people that look up to you, I know I do.
Hmm.
I was just telling Thaddeus before you joined that I'm always looking for his whispers. That he always posts heart whispers, along with the photography. And every time I'm always on LinkedIn looking, where's Thaddeus? Going to his page to see what did Thaddeus say to us today? Because I feel that he's speaking to me, and maybe a lot of people feel that he's speaking to you too. And that leads me to my next question. You are an artist, Thaddeus.
Hmm.
You have managed to incorporate the arts into a form of healing and wellness. And I feel that through your art, whether it's photography, whether it's the your book that you authored and other initiatives, that you find a way to incorporate art and remind us, that art is a social justice movement. Art is part of that. If we think back, to the days of slavery, we hear songs, we hear poems, that out of grief, out of pain, the most beautiful art is born so that we can learn from each other and receive some sort of soothing,
Hmm.
for what we're going through. So can you tell us a little bit about how you use the arts, as part of your mission?
Well, I think, the next in a couple of weeks, I'm receiving an award from the Mass College of Art for some of my art and my movements through community. The when I started to do reflection and started to think about healing, uh, one of the challenges for me is how do I do that? And so it came from me really starting to go through some pain, right? I picked up a camera because I got divorced. And going through that divorce, I was looking for something to do to be creative to get me out of the house. And I took a camera class, a photography class with my son. Now he hated it and I loved it, right? He hated it because it was film, right? And you couldn't get that instant gratification, right? Now everybody has a camera and everybody's a photographer with their cell phones, right? But at that time, what I learned was through picking up that camera, through going through those classes, I learned that I wasn't seeing the world, right? I learned that I had never slowed down enough to really see the world. It's where I live in Lowell, there's a pathway, there's on the waterway that at that time my son was 12 and I had to take a picture of flowers, right? So the first thing I did is I went out to Stop and Shop and brought some flowers, took the picture, went back to class. She's like, no, you need to go outside and take some flowers. And I was walking that pathway and I saw that there were flowers on the embankment. And so I had walked that pathway since my son was born and had never seen that there were flowers on the embankment. There is a point of me getting on the highway from where I live that it always jams up. And I've been doing that for 20 years. And I looked over to the side one day and I saw that there was a car in the middle of the woods. So on that Sunday, I pulled over and I went over there and I walked through and the car had trees growing through the basement of it because it had rusted so much. And so how for 20 years I've never seen that car. So for me, it was about opening up and understanding what I'm missing. And photography allowed me to really think about what lens am I seeing life through, right? Am I using and what is my aperture and what are my other settings? And so if I've got a 70 by 200 lens on, that first 70 meters, I'm missing something. If I'm shooting at at an F-22, I'm seeing everything, but everything's flat. And so for me, it was really starting to think about the lens of life that I'm seeing life through, and how do I really incorporate art to create change. And so I think one of my first projects, I did faces up close and personal, because I was tired of people thinking about how they saw Black people or people of color. And for 537 days, I posted a photo of a person of color and the beauty of that person, a candid photo. I did a photo of a men of color photo on the top of Humboldt and Seaver, and it was men that couldn't really walk those streets that were out there. Now those some of those same men are two are presidents of universities. One is the head of security or protection for Bruno Mars. Others, one is actually my boss right now, right? And he was a young man at that time that's still 20 years younger than me, and he's now my boss. There's this thing of art creating connection and healing. And so personally for me, art allowed that 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid that loved to draw, that was told that drawing, was a little bit girly, and gave it up, right? Because people in my community didn't see it as anything that a young boy should be doing. Uh, and so getting into art allowed me to heal, allowed me to understand, it allowed me to connect to communities that I wouldn't have necessarily connected to. It allowed me to broaden my overall perspective. And so whatever I'm doing in life, whether it's writing, whether it's having a conversation, whether it's being in community, I'm always trying to be aware of what lens am I looking at this through? What perspective am I seeing it through? Am I missing what's right in front of me and looking so far out? Or am I looking at what's in front of me and not paying attention to what's further out? You know what I mean? Have I narrowed it so much that everything else behind me is blurry, and I'm not really seeing the entire picture? And I think for me, that's been the concept of being able to use art and being able to use photography, the rules of photography, the rules of art, and being open to misinterpretation, right? Because with art, whatever's on that wall is, when somebody else sees it, everybody has a different perspective. So I'm open to people having a different perspective of who I am based on what they see and what moment they see it. And that's allowed me to be able to actually move forward in a much different way, with programming, with how I think about diversity, how I think about the aspect of belonging, and how do I intersect with all of that in many different ways.
Thank you. Thank you. So much of what you said resonates, especially the part Keith said that he didn't know that we were going to be discussing f-stop, zoom aperture.
Well, Keith
And-
knows all of that, right?
yeah, which is of course a new language for me, because I don't know much about, photography except what it invokes, when I see the photography. Thaddeus, what made you into this individual, this man, that is able, to see not only what's in front of you, but also what's in the background? Like, is this something that you find that you were always like this since you were small? Or do you think that came from your experiences of traveling the world, being in the Air Force?
Well, if we've been real up here, since we're having a family conversation,
Yes, we are.
and everybody knows I'm pretty vulnerable and open. I wasn't that kid, right? I was the kid that gave my mom hell, right? I ran away from home several times. I did a lot of, different things, but I was a great athlete, right? And so there was all of these mixtures of reality. You know, College, Air Force, they shaped me in many different ways. And if I would say anything that changed my thought process, it was the birth of my son. It was the birth of my son, and being able to look at the perspective of what am I leaving in this world for him? What am I leaving for a legacy for him to be able to tell our kids and grandkids and others about? And to be honest, I make mistakes each and every day. I mean, I'm human. We have challenges and facing those. And sometimes, it's you try to move through it, but you can't. But, and I'd say the last thing that sort of made me is when I started to understand that I needed to give my mother her flowers while she was still living, right? Because you know, she was every day until she passed a few months ago, she was on her knees praying for me, right? And praying for my siblings. And she prayed a little harder for me, right? And so it's like, how do I give her flowers, right? While she can see it? How do I let her know that all of those prayers and all of that sacrifice that she gave and giving up her body, being older, and the disease and other things that she suffered from having to work, 4 or 5 jobs to be able to take care of her kids. How do I let her know that that I'm worthy of that, and that I received that, and that I'm truly have been worthy of her love and her sacrifice. And so once that started to resonate in my mind a little bit differently, I started to drive differently. But I also saw a lot, right? And I saw a lot of a pain that people were having that I could do something about. And if I did not do something about it, then I wasn't the stand-up person that I thought I was, right? And so there's been many challenges, there's been many failures of being able to learn from those failures and figure out how to continue to move forward, and how to continue to embrace love, and to be able to show my mom, right, that that all that she sacrificed has made me a much better person. And I know that even today, and as I'm speaking, that she's up there looking down, smiling and saying, "That's right, boy. I did have to sacrifice a lot for you." But it's a blessing. And so learning to live in that love and not in that pain that she's no longer here, but to be able to live in that love, uh, that I was worthy of that love, and that she was able to see it, continues to push me forward.
Yes, powerful, powerful. And what a gift to her that you figured this out, while she was still with us in this particular life, and that she was able to see, like you say, that everything that maybe when she was yelling at you when you were young, and you
Yeah,
were
a lot of
getting,
that.
yeah, a lot of that,
Yeah.
that it actually went in, because as you probably know, and others here who have children, or
Mhm.
nieces, nephew, a lot of times we feel like we're just talking to them and they're not listening, nothing is
Yeah,
just
yeah,
going in
no.
one ear, if it goes in the ear.
Right.
But as a parent, to see, like, oh, they were listening,
Mhm.
even when I thought they weren't listening, they were listening. So she
Yeah.
she she created that foundation. And I, for one, I'm grateful to her. Although I never had the honor of meeting your mother, I am grateful that she gave you to us, to our community,
Thank you. Thank you.
and that she lives through you. You mentioned, everything that you talk about love, about joy. These are things, that maybe 10 years ago, oh no, we don't talk about that. That's
Mhm.
separate. Your professional life is separate from those feelings. Um, and one of the beautiful things, Thaddeus, that you have always done for years, because I've been following you for years, is always incorporate, love, vulnerability, joy, and healing, into the message, into what you bring to each space. And that leads me to the next thing I want to hear from you about before we let others, comment or ask some questions. It's the Black Joy movement,
Mhm.
which has been an important and crucial reminder of the importance of finding light even in the darkest times. Now, given the current challenges that many of us are facing, what advice do you have for us that are trying to find moments of joy even when we feel that the whole world is falling apart? How do we cultivate joy when we don't really feel like it? We don't feel like doing anything to find joy. What would be your advice, to us as we move on to the new year?
Well, I think there's a lot of things to do, and I think this sort of addresses Keith's question and some of the other questions around the whole climate. So what happened is not anything that I did not expect, right? And so I look at life in a completely different way that pieces don't always surprise me, right? Because the reality is America is what America is, and then so there's challenges that we're going to have to face every day, and some aspects of that, uh, we're not going to take away my joy, right? And so, so I do a few things. I embrace small moments of joy, right? I embrace the fact that I was actually, so since we're talking about that, I was able to vote. I embraced that my community turned out and actually voted more. I embrace the fact that I can actually have a conversation with my son and others about some of those things. So it's finding, so when we start to think about like what can we do now, it's finding joy in every day in the small things. You know, Yesterday I posted, the Heart Whisper we were talking about earlier because it was it's a P-Funk Wednesday, right? Because I was listening to a song in the gym that, I hadn't heard since 1982. It popped up on my playlist and I loved it. And that was my song all day long. You know what I mean? And so being able to tap into that one moment and listen to that one song, which is, 7 minutes long, because anybody that knows P-Funk, right, knows what that is. Uh, Took me all the way through the entire day, right? So embracing those. I focus on what I can control, not what I can't control. Concentrate on the actions and routines that bring you a sense of stability, happiness, right? Through this last 2 years, through my, the example, what I can tell you is what happened last week does not compare to what happened to me 5 months ago when my mom passed. And so being able to move through that and deal with that grief in a certain way and being able to move towards love through that, I'm not going to let something else that I cannot control push me back and have me think about something in a negative perspective. My issue is when I saw it, it's like, all right, what do I do now? Right? What is my next thing that I can really sort of push towards thriving and about bringing us together and about addressing this opportunity to really thrive and move together versus this thing that continues to say that we're going to be divided. And I'm not talking about the individual. I'm talking about the spirit that's out there. That people say there's more division, there's more anything. And I feel like we talk about that more than others talk about it. So for me, like through before like dealing with my mom's process, I went and got yoga certified. So now I'm a certified yoga instructor. So maybe one day I'll be able to do the YW Boston 2019 yoga class, right? But and so for me, it was like learning to do some breath work, right? Learning to really like I can't really meditate sitting still. So I ended up doing Qigong, right, which allowed me to do more meditation and other components. And so and being able to do it and figure out how to share it, you know? And so for me, there's okay. I see that. Keith, I'm gonna call you. So understanding that, then cultivating community, right? Like this call, this Zoom and seeing these beautiful faces up here that, help really help me figure out how to thrive in many different ways is a moment of joy for me. That's going to last me through the day, right? And it's just such it's such a thing of like when you start to build community and lean into relationships and uplift folks that are supporting you and being with folks that are supporting you, there's something about that. Practice gratitude, right? And so every day, at the end of the day, I write what am I grateful for? Even if it's messed up, even if I had a very rough day, I look at like what am I grateful for about that day? Because sometimes we're so caught up in the moment that we don't actually understand the lesson that we learned from that moment. So I try to step away from it and look at what happened and what can I learn from it and what can I be thankful for. You know, sometimes we say, "Oh, that person really acted out." And whatever to me. I'm like, no, I'm glad they exposed who they really are and what they really think. And now I know how to move forward. Doesn't mean that I disassociate from them. And it may mean that, but it also means that I've learned something because they may be having a moment, right? They may be going through same struggles that I'm going through at a certain time, right? And so, and just releasing it in a different way, right? And so there's that. There's this create space for self-care. Like I am big in getting in my car and getting up in the mountains and going and doing whatever, you know, we're back, Keith, we're back to f-stops, right? I'm back out. I've got, 10 lenses in a truck, right? Three different cameras, right? Seek out uplifting content, right? There's a lot on social media. There's a lot on other pieces that can uplift you instead of reading. Like I don't read all of this nonsense, right? Because it's not really worth what uh, changing my energy for. You know, mindful reflections, right? And moments that I'm challenged, I still, and I'm gonna go back to my mom. I still have mornings where I wake up and I can smell her on my pillow. But I take that moment instead of looking in the sorrow of it, right? I look at the joy of it. I can see her laughing. I can see her us talking about wrestling, as she called it. Right? You know what I mean? And those other components, right? And then so, I think those are the things. And I think the last couple of things is here, I remember your why. Don't let anything take your why away from you, right? Or to really change it. And so I know my whys in the areas that I'm truly focused on, and nothing outside is going to change what that is. Now I may adapt to the changing societies, but nothing's going to change that, right? And I'm solid about that, and understanding that joy is a resistance. That quiet joy is a resistance, right? And so, I'm not, joy for me is my shield, right? I already think I'm Superman because I've lost 60 pounds. I'm a yoga instructor now. I can run a little bit, right? Whatever it is, you know what I mean? And so for me is that if you come into me with some stuff, joy is gonna hold it there and push it back to you, right? Joy is me hearing my heartbeat when I wake up in the morning. Joy is lots of different things to me uh, that we should really start to think about. And then I think the main thing for me, which is what I do a lot, is share and amplify joy. Because a lot of times we don't really share those moments, right? Like one of the most beautiful mornings I had in the last couple of weeks was when a beautiful person on this Zoom shared the birth of their child and sent me a picture. What a way to wake to wake up that morning, right? And to be able to see this beautiful person, right, that has an amazing, amazing family that's gonna, that has the opportunity, whatever they do, may change this world, right, from what it is now, right? And all the hopes and dreams that the family has for that person, but also all the hopes and dreams that I have for that person, right? And the love that's there. And so for me, right, like sharing those moments, right? Because sometimes we forget how special those moments are, right? And for her to share that with me was about really love, right? Right? It's about love and it's about moments, right? And it's about uplifting and it's about spirit. Right. And so all of these challenges that we're facing, I mean, getting that photo pushed all of that away, I didn't think about anything else that day but the beauty of this person's soul and the family that surrounds them and where they can go around being filled with love and leaving this nonsense that's out here as nonsense and noise while we continue to strive and to fight and to do what we need to do to make sure that a lot of that is pushed away. And so that's uh you know, I feel like I'm preaching for a second, but I did
Oh,
write a, I did,
preach.
I did, I knew I was coming here, but I did write um, a heart whisper because I know that that's something for today, and so I think this might be a good moment to read it before we get into Keith and Eden's questions, right? So, because then I might get fired up in a different way. So here's the heart whisper that I wrote. In the midst of chaos, remember that joy is not just an emotion, it's a quiet, powerful act of defiance. It's the light you carry within, even when shadows stretch long. Nurture it, share it, and let it remind you that hope and thriving are always within reach. Choose joy. It whispers back, you are still here, and that is enough.
Allow me to take a deep breath. Wow. Thaddeus, thank you for that. That was beautiful. That is beautiful. An act of defiance. Be joy, embracing joy, finding joy, even in the darkest hours. And that is what you do, Thaddeus. You remind us, you teach us that it's about the lens that we choose to use when looking out at the world. Something you said earlier about, when we're in our car driving, we got to get to work. We got to get to work. Oh, pee, get out of my way. Get out of my way. We don't even know that there's trees on the side of that highway, and we have to, and you remind us of that. You remind us of that little flower that grows in downtown Boston in the street, where nothing should be growing, but it still grows. And we are grateful for you for that.
Yeah, because I think we got to remember, right? It's like we always hear that, oh, the rose can grow through the concrete, right? And that's true. But how is the rose being nourished to be able to grow through that concrete? Is it being nourished with anger and resentment and jealousy and other pieces, which gives it a certain power and it comes out a certain way? Or is it being nourished with love and support and
Yes.
affirmations and the other components that will actually give it more power and break through easier, right? And
Yes.
continue to not just come through, but also dig deep within the
The
roots,
roots. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Versus the anger that just exposes itself. But we're getting off subject though.
Oh. Well, I for one, before I because we want to be mindful of your time. I for one, I'm already thinking of ways, that we can come together in the year coming ahead. In I'm already seeing you doing a yoga class, probably in Franklin Park, where we all come, and enjoy and just absorb good energy. So many ideas, because we are grateful that we have somebody like you, Thaddeus, in Boston in our lives, and we are looking forward, to learning from you, to be able to lean on the lessons that you bless us with. I could say so much, but like I said, I'm going to have to schedule like a dinner with you so I can just sit there for hours and listen to you. I'm going to open the floor to see if anybody else wants to say anything. It could be a question, a comment, whatever you would like to say.
So I'll jump in. I usually look for my hand raised, but on Zoom, I can't figure it. So if I'm not proper, I apologize. But don't know Gabriella herself, but for Eden and I know just again, thank you, memory lane, carving out time bad day today, but I blocked this off for lunch and apologize for the yogurt while doing it. But the joy there again, the memories, but it also, listening to you, it's funny that our rabbi had gone to Cuba the week before the election. And on
Oh,
Friday,
man.
last Friday, his sermon evoked a lot of the same themes. The same people that need our help to be fed are still hungry. Those immigrants that we're supporting still need our assistance. And boy, the right to vote, was there. Now, my
Right.
wife didn't believe him. She didn't like it. Okay, so that is what I'm dealing with. And I'm trying to cancel the ny.times.com and delete MSNBC so she can move forward.
Yeah.
But hearing those themes comes both from religion and those who are living it. So it was great to hear that. But I'll still just ask my one question that was there. It's just, how are you doing right now? You and everything.
Yeah, I'm actually doing pretty well. It's emotionally I'm all over the place around different things, right? Because this will be, honestly, in 2 weeks it'll be the first Thanksgiving without my mom, right? It'll
Right.
be the first Christmas without my mom, and so there's a moment here that I want to cry, right? Because both of y'all know that I'll
Yeah.
cry in a minute, right? But so I've actually been working harder around that, around making sure that my grieving process is still solid and based in love, and making sure that my two sisters that we're connected in a different way than some of this other stuff that I really can't control,
Mhm.
right? Uh, and so my heart feels good, right? I was the thing I love about the iPhone, the thing I hate about the iPhone is it pops up memories. So every other day I
Yep,
get a
yep,
picture
yep,
of my
yep,
mom, right,
yep.
from something, right? Because I end up doing a video montage for her going away service, and so I got all of these pictures sent to me, and now they constantly pop up. You know what I mean? But they pop up in the right moments, right? And so I think there's just something about like working through these last couple of years that has prepared me for this moment to think about it differently, and to live in it differently, right? Because even when I look at like what's just happening in the world, when I look at all of these appointments, right? When I look at like, I don't even know where the military is going right now, but I want to get into all of that because then somebody will be saying a lot of negative stuff on the discussion on the YouTube. But
Yeah.
it's just
Well, I appreciate it, but also just one that give you joy
yeah,
tonight. And
yeah.
a story that you told for others is go watch a segment from this past week, Saturday Night Live, with Bill
Mm-hmm.
Barr from Boston as a Community. And it has two sons trying to talk to their dad on how are you doing and something seriously. And dad, I think one was Keenan, was doing it. It's like, the Eagles don't have a punter. And
Right.
no, dad, how are you doing? It's like, they just can't score in the first quarter. No,
Right.
dad, how you doing? And he starts crying. And then they start talking code about the elections,
Right.
allergies. And it's just one that, again, listening to you and so appreciating your stories with your son and the difficulties of bridging those gaps. So again,
Yeah.
my day's been made. I'll go to others, but thank you, and happy college basketball season to you as well.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. And and then I'll but when I saw you pop in, all of our conversations pop right in, right? The
Right.
conversations that we had for years. And what I mean? And what people don't know is even you helping me get the shirts,
Yep.
right? For Black Joy through when you were at Reebok, right? And so, that was the initial drive of it, right? Of being able to launch it and being at the MFA and other pieces. And so the connection is there, man. I just, just seeing your face, man, is just it's just a blessing. And
Thank you.
and just hearing
Appreciate
your
it.
voice and I know that you've got a lot happening in the world, right? Not just this election, but in many other spaces. And I appreciate you taking the time. And right after this, I'm gonna go get some yogurt.
Others, thank
Uh,
you.
Thanks.
Keith, thank you so much for that. I'm absorbing all this, and I'm gonna carry it with me for the rest of the day. Now, Gabriela and Eden, would you like to say anything? Or I know Gabriela just came from Cuba, and
Yeah, I
Eden
saw
is
that.
and Eden is with the Ocean School. Yes, so You have the floor.
Yes, I'd love to ask a question. Thank you, Adriana, and thank you, Thaddeus, for being here today. You're definitely the man, the myth, the legend in the Boston community. So it's amazing to get your insights and hear your whispers and this group today. And I immediately recognized the picture, after having just returned yesterday from an amazing and really powerful trip. But I wanted to ask you, as someone who leads a diverse team and a young team that's kind of really struggling with the decisions that this country has made, and also how it impacts our work. I have some projects that are federally funded that have DEI components in them that will not continue moving forward, right? And that's really disappointing and really impacts the field and the work around the country. And so just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts, as leaders of diverse teams and young teams and people that started this work being very mission driven, working for nonprofits, and got into it to make an impact in the DEI space, and are kind of wondering what's next, in addition to what you've already shared, which I think a lot of it applies, right? And looking at the things we can control and finding those moments of joy, and finding those moments that we can make impacts. Any other thoughts of leaders of diverse team, what we can be doing in kind of this crucial moment that we're in right now.
Yeah, no, I feel you, right? It's because, I think the one thing that we have to think about is how do we listen, right? How do we listen to our team, right? Because some of us are listening with old ears and with a fixed mindset. And so if we can listen with a growth mindset, that would be different. I think the other thing is give yourself and help them learn how to practice self-compassion, right? Because a lot of times we don't do that. We do aftercare. We don't necessarily do self-care. And how do they give themselves some grace? And how to help them recognize that this is a moment, right? We've had a lot of these moments in our history where somebody has been elected or something else has happened that challenges us, right? And how do we continue to move forward? And that sitting still is not necessarily a bad thing for a moment, right? To be able to understand and move from that. Leverage your networks, right? I think is like start to talk to them and leverage your networks, and understand that there's constant learning or continuous learning that needs to happen, right? And that they need to connect with those that are actually thriving in this work to understand what they're doing. There's, so when I started to look at, and Keith's the lawyer, the Supreme Court ruling around schools, right? That is very limited, but it's opened up the world that everybody's trying to, be preemptive for the next ruling that they don't even know whether that's coming or not. Right. And it's no different than the fun with the black women, and they settled it. And, it's all of these other things that are happening. There's certain, it goes back to, right, understanding and getting more knowledge, but leveraging your network. Be creative in your messaging, right? There's things that, like, I don't always say DEI, right? Because then honestly, I'm not always a big fan of saying DEI, because people have narrowed DEI down so much that it's a black and white issue, right? It's not necessarily, the LGBTQIA. It's not a generational issue, right? It's, what I mean? It's not those that are handy capable. It's not all of these other issues, right? Like when I started to look at it, right? When I started to look at diversity, I'm looking at those of us that are in this sandwich generation, right? And how do we come together? Like we're having to take care of our parents, and we have to take care of our adult kids in some way because of all of the impact that's happening to them, right? That's a set of issues around our well-being. And I think when we start to think about it is how do we think about DEI, diversity around well-being in the workplace? And what does that really look like? How do we be creative around what that is? And then, the last thing I say is embrace patience, right? It's like, patience and sitting and seeing and viewing is a beautiful thing, because that gives you the ability to activate. And then I go back to pay attention to the language change. It reveals insight and opportunity for impactful action. So listen and listen actively. Because a lot of times we're hearing it, we're not listening to it. And just hearing it doesn't really give you the strategy or how to address it and how to create change. But if you're actively listening and listening to the language, as Keith would say, right? It's like every one of those little I's and T's, then that gives you the strategy of how you can actually move forward. And I really would love to see some of your pictures from Cuba.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Gabriela, for such an important question, to help us adjust the lens, of how we're looking at that. I'm glad that that you spoke, Thaddeus, about not using the word DEI, because before DEI existed, we were still doing the work. It just,
Yeah.
became something. So
I like Gabrielle's person centered.
person
Yeah.
center, yes.
'Cause I love doing stuff from a human design, not necessarily a business design.
Yes. Eden, would you like to add anything?
I unfortunately need to hop off to another meeting, and I know we're at time, but I just want to express my tremendous gratitude to Thaddeus. It's just such a joy to get to hear you speak and be connected, and it just brought me a lot of joy today. So I'm very grateful for you, and just I'm so thrilled that this program is happening, and we get to hear incredible voices like yours.
Yes.
No, thank you, Eden. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, Thaddeus, you gave us extra time, for which we are so grateful, because we needed that. I, for one, I'm walking away carrying everything that you shared with us and focused on finding joy, even in the smallest things. This is an intentional quest to make sure that I use the right lens. I would like to thank Keith, Gabriela, and Eden for being here. And we will have more opportunities in 2025, because now I'm going to reach out to Thaddeus so we can figure out how to support our community in the coming year.
One thing before we close,
Yes.
Gabriela, I'd love to come talk to your team sometime. I'd love to
Yes.
hear what they're thinking and
Yes.
figure out if there's a way to connect. So feel
Yeah.
free to reach out. I'm finally sort of getting
Great.
back in that space where I'm
Oh.
starting, even though I know I owe Eden a text, we're gonna
Yes.
figure it out. So,
Yeah,
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Same.
holidays,
Yes.
everyone. Thank you.